Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the September 11th, 2023 meeting of the Rockingham County Planning Board. This is a regularly scheduled meeting, which I now call to order. At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Corey Scott for our invocation.
Let's pray. God in heaven, we are grateful to be here in this planning board meeting and grateful for the opportunity to serve the community. We pray that thou will bless these proceedings, that we will all be attentive and be able to understand the needs of both the county, the citizens, and in light of the regulations that we have been given. We pray for thy protection and pray for the success of our efforts in doing what we consider through thy Spirit to be the right thing. And this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
And now I would ask that you all join the planning board in observing a moment of silence in remembrance of the 2,977 people who perished on this day at the hands of Al-Qaeda 22 years ago. Thank you. Let the record show that a quorum of the planning board members is present to conduct the county's business. At this time, we'll move to item 3 on the agenda, which is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt the agenda as written.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adopt the agenda as written. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. The vote's unanimous. The agenda is adopted. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes for the August 14th, 2023 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the August 14th, 2023 minutes as written.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes of the August 14th, 2023 meeting. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, like sign. Doesn't appear to be any opposition. So the minutes are approved. The case we're going to hear tonight is a rezoning case, which involves changing the county map. Zoning map changes reviewed by this planning board are legislative matters. These map changes are reviewed for reasonableness and consistency with North Carolina General Statute 160D, the county's 2021 Land Use Plan, and Unified Development Ordinance, among other adopted plans. When making a decision, we consider the recommendations of planning staff and public comments. When applicable, this board reviews potential land uses requested by the applicant. Planning board decisions are forwarded to the Board of Commissioners as recommendations. The Board of Commissioners will hold a public meeting before making a final decision whether to approve or deny a zoning map change recommended by this board. A zoning map change is the first in a series of reviews and approvals that move a project forward. The Technical Review Committee reviews the site plans and technical items related but not limited to later development approvals, including transportation concerns, environmental issue, and county services. The TRC is comprised of professional staff and other agency members, such as the North Carolina Department of Transportation, county schools, emergency services, and the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Each case on the agenda requesting a zoning map change will be presented to the planning board by a member of the planning staff. Following the presentation by staff, the applicant of the case will be given an opportunity to address this board. After having heard from the applicant, the meeting will be open for public comment, at which time I will call upon the people who signed up to speak. At the end of that period, the public comment period will be closed, and the applicant will be given an additional amount of time for rebuttal. Following that, the board will have a discussion, motions will be made, and a vote will be taken as far as a recommendation to the county commissioners. You have a point.
Yes, Mr. Chair, before we begin this request, I do need to disclose that I have a familial relationship with owners of property that abut this request. My husband is a co-owner of a piece of property that does not abut it, but is close enough that he received a postcard in the mail. I do not believe that relationship will hinder my ability to fairly and justly look at this and impartially look at this request. I feel like I can move forward.
I have a question for you. Do you have any financial interest in the outcome of this case?
I do not have any financial interest in this case.
Then I don't see a problem. Does anyone object? There are no objections, so you can continue.
Thank you very much.
At this time, we're going to call upon staff to present us with case number 2023-14.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Let me get to my presentation screen here. Some of you who may have been around about a year and a half ago, early in 2022, these same folks came forward with a very similar idea and presentation, but for different reasons at the time, it didn't work out and the case was withdrawn. They have come back with a bit more of a concrete plan, agreement to conditions, and are requesting not exactly the same thing, but quite similar uses. So this is case number 2023-14, Randy Bradford and Brittany, his wife. It's located at 6696 NC 770, Mayo Township. Its zip code is Stoneville, but it's really closer to Eden. And this is a conditional rezoning. I'm going to flip to my staff report because this one's got some gray areas. I'll slow down a little bit. We can talk about things, and the applicants are here to answer questions. Here's the location, again, like I mentioned, a bit closer to Eden, but the Stoneville zip code. The 1 to 5,000 scale zoning map shows the subject parcel. To the east is a partially zoned light industrial parcel that was zoned back in 1997 for what was then called just a salvage yard. And in between, we have a legally non-conforming use, not illegally non-conforming use. Also, this wasn't in your packet, but I thought it would be informative. I meant to have that in there. Sort of a 1 to 10,000 view, which shows in the area we have some neighborhood commercial a bit further down the street, which is a printing shop, or historically has been a printing shop. You have some highway commercial at the intersection of, I believe that's Eden Road and Settlebridge, or where Eden turns into Settlebridge, unless I'm mistaken. There is also a lot over here that is zoned residential agricultural, but that has a rural family occupation permit for a very similar type of operation of what's being proposed here that was granted back in the late 90s or early 2000s. These other light industrial rezonings that are not truly nearby but are in the area One happened in 2005, the larger one at the southern end of the map, and the smaller one was actually updated in 2020 as a conditional use list that gained approval at that time. It had already been zoned industrial at that time. Just to give you sort of an overview, and of course, directly north of there, we also have the Whispering Pines major residential subdivision and other low-density residential uses nearby. This is located in the Dan River Eden watershed, which is protected, of course. This is a land use map snapshot. It's in the G1 land class. As we've talked about before, G1 land class parcels, thank you, are primarily meant for low-density residential development and limited commercial development at strategic crossroads intersections. There is a crossroads intersection near this parcel. It's about 3,500 feet to the west of here, so we didn't really consider that close enough to that sort of crossroads section to give that very much weight when we were considering the reasonableness and consistency. So G1, this is just a parcel overhead snapshot that gives you, this photography is from early 2022. It's the North Carolina State aerial photography. Pretty much the most recent view of the property. This structure's been here since the 70s, according to the tax office. It's been used for different commercial ventures and other things over the years prior to the institution of actual zoning, but has been in disuse for quite some time now. And these folks prepare to develop it for the uses we talk about here in the staff report. Before I move forward, a couple things I did want to point out in the staff report, and to clarify also, we look at consistency and reasonableness at the staff level, at the planning board level, and at the commissioner's level. Sometimes a proposal is just lined straight up and down with what's consistent according to the land use plan and reasonable within the zoning context. Sometimes it just absolutely does not, and we just think, no, that's just not a good idea. This one's kind of in the middle. There are some things about the consistency of it that don't really match with the land use plan. Industrial zoning is not particularly recognized or recommended in the G1 land class, and some of these uses without conditions could be viewed as conflicting to some degree with some of the residential uses in the area. So we researched this one pretty carefully, and mentioning the case from down the street. Hold on just a sec. I'll go back a map so I can point this out to you. Go back to our zoomed out map. As you're looking at it, it's to your far east. There's a small parcel over there that you can't see zoned conditional use, but it is residential agricultural and it has a special use permit for a rural family occupation. And it was for car repair. And Margie and I, this from 2002, Margie and I looked at the conditions for approval of that, and they unwittingly were almost exactly the same conditions that he and I suggested adding to make this a better fit with the current land use plan, a better fit with the neighborhood to try to mitigate any negative impacts that might happen. I'll move forward here. This is the proposed site plan. It's turned a different direction than the actual parcel, so you have to turn it in your head a little bit. With the parking lot and the main building, the storage of vehicle area will be fenced. The property line will have to be screened at minimum with the landscape buffers called for in the development standards. We are also recommending some additional conditions to sort of soften its approval. As we talked about, it's the G1 land class. This is conditional. As a conditional request, any of the individual uses in light industrial conditional district may be reviewed, discussed, or decided upon by both the planning board and the county commissioners. I sat down with the applicants to talk about what their goals are. We went through the full list of uses in the light industrial district and narrowed it down to these choices. You will note that when comparing this to the application for last year, the salvage yard / junkyard option is removed. That is not my part of the proposal this time. Primarily dealing with with automobile sales, repair, towing, and temporary storage of vehicles that are then shipped off-site. There will be no on-site sales of wrecked or salvaged motor vehicle parts. And these are our suggested additional conditions, which I'll explain how they exceed what we usually talk about. Other than the pre-existing structure, we would recommend a 50-foot setback from all property lines, which is a little bit more than would be called for by the typical standards of the ordinance. We would ask if the NC Department of Transportation requires it, which they may, at least have an evaluation for the need for a commercial driveway permit to make entrance and exit as safe as possible. We would request that the primary access to the parcel be permanently 24/7 gated with a gate of at least 6 feet above minimum grade. Anywhere there land disturbing permits might be required from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, those would be conditioned. If a licensed surveyor or soil scientist finds an intermittent or perennial stream anywhere on the waterway, we would suggest a 50-foot buffer in addition to the usual 30-foot buffer to give it a little bit of extra protection. To highlight again, at no point shall this facility function as a junkyard or salvage yard as defined by the county UDO. We are suggesting that the usual sign types would be allowed to be larger and a bit taller. We're requesting that we limit the sign type so that it keeps with the residential character of the neighborhood a little bit more. And we are asking that one of the conditional approvals would be final approval comes from technical review committee upon review of a detailed site plan as submitted by the applicant. A few of those things are a little bit different from what we looked at last time. Staff recommends approval with those conditions. We wanted to be clear about that. So that's one of the things I was going to make a point about, that Corey had a good question earlier. We were just speaking in general about there's a little discrepancy with the land use plan here. There's a little discrepancy with some of the uses perhaps in the area, and those things do come up. Sometimes they're significant enough that it does warrant thinking about maybe we shouldn't approve this. Sometimes they're sort of in the middle, like we've talked about. Sometimes they're quite clear. We just felt like in this condition, because there has been a history of some industrial zoning in the area, there are some special permits that are active in the area that with the right sort of required additional conditions, any negative impacts of this could be mitigated and the character of the neighborhood retained to the maximum extent possible, while allowing the owners and the current applicants to gain use from the property itself. You will also notice, and then I'll hush, I've said enough, that we included this in the reasonableness and consistency statement. It's a bit different than what we usually have, which are generally our standard criteria for reasonableness and consistency. We wanted to clarify which points are reasonable or unreasonable, which points are consistent or inconsistent. And we wanted to label those to make that a bit easier and clearer. And since these are suggested for approval, to allow this, we included these. Now, don't forget that next sentence for motions to approve or deny, and as may be amended. Of course, this board may amend any of those conditions, may add others, may ask for adjustments to just about anything. But with that, I'll shut up. I've talked enough, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, I have some questions. The first one is, how did the determination of 35 feet for the building height come to be?
That came from this typical height in industrial and non-residential areas is 50. We chose 35 because 35 is the maximum height in the residential areas. So that was to bring it down to what would be a maximum height for a structure in a residential zone, sort of to keep it in line with what you would typically see in the G1 land district. And that would be for any new structures, not necessarily for the structure that already exists.
I seem to recall at the last time that this proposal came before the board, that one of the biggest objections from the people in the Whispering Pines development specifically was that from their porches where they sit out, they would have a clear view
Right.
of this property because it's downgrade from them.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, if, even if we put up, say, a whole big bank of Leyland cypress trees, which would remain green year-round, it would be hard to disguise a 35-foot building.
Right. It'd be even harder to disguise a 50-foot building.
Yeah.
But
I was wondering
that's a
if
fair
that had
consideration.
some special requirement of the applicant that they needed a 35-foot.
Staff is who proposed that, and that was to simply bring it in line, not specifically having to do with that concern, even though we do know that it is a concern. We've had about 4 or 5 phone calls, 4 folks or so who have expressed concerns or disapproval of this idea, and one that was just an inquiry, and that has come up again in phone conversations, that folks who live at a higher elevation can still see over the trees and into this facility. So that would be one of those things that this board would need to balance as far as
Well,
Are the conditions
the
different
cypress trees I'm talking about, they grow very fast, and I wouldn't be surprised if they can't reach a height of 35 feet. But as,
well, there are types out there that can, yeah.
yeah. Is it possible that, after speaking with the applicant, that we can get away with a lower building and still be in conformance with a UDO or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to try to get more information, but yes, that would.
Next question is the property served by public water and sewer?
Public water is available on, Dan River Water is available on NC 770. There is not public sewer, so there would have to be an individual septic system for wastewater, and there might be additional wastewater management devices required based on the activities of the automobile shop and what NCDEQ regulations would include. The county does not have any specific stormwater regulations above and beyond the state minimum of NCDEQ. So we rely on what those rules are and work in cooperation with them to enforce those if they come up.
Anyone else on the board have questions for Lynn Cochran?
I do too. I do too.
Okay. Well, I looked over to my right first, so James, go ahead.
All right. Lynn, in number 7, under conditional use approvals, we listed as bullet statements number 2 and 3, automobile parts and sales, automobile sales and rentals. But yet down in staff recommendations in G, it says it includes sales of used or salvaged motor vehicle parts. So can you square that up for me a little bit?
Oh, this is for, just a good question. In the conditional use approvals requested, this is for complete vehicles, automobile sales and/or automobile rentals. What we're addressing in the additional conditions is salvaged portions or parts of wrecked or junked vehicles. A fully repaired vehicle itself could be sold as part of this if they're granted approval. But there's not going to be like a pick-apart sort of thing. Do you have a question?
Yeah. How tall is the current structure there?
You know what? I did not know off the top of my head.
It's low.
It's not that tall. It can't be more than 35 feet for sure.
I don't think it's 20 feet.
Yeah,
way under that.
yeah.
And right now, nobody can see it. We're not hearing that people
At
can see.
street grade, there's a full bank of vegetation. It's difficult to see, except perhaps in the winter. But then when you cross over and head up into Whispering Pines, the elevations increase and you can sort of see over the horizon.
Okay, got it, thanks.
You know.
John Roberts.
Only on this picture of the
The concept plan.
plan here, proposed, where it says storage of vehicles, are those vehicles going to be, what's their condition? I mean, are they going to be in some state of rehabilitation or repair while they're out there?
In some cases, yes. This use would allow for storage of vehicles which are simply coming there full repair. These folks also operate a towing operation whereby there would be temporary storage of salvaged or junked vehicles as part of the outdoor storage that's allowed in the industrial district. But it would not include permanent storage or permanent.
Is that area accessible to the public?
It would be fenced and gated.
I mean, where it says storage of vehicles, would that specific area be accessible by the public?
No, that would be fenced and gated and available to the employees. That was part of the conditions.
Employees only?
Yeah.
Okay. And no parts are going to be removed from those vehicles and sold to the public?
Yeah, that's specifically excluded.
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. On one of the conditions, the conditional use, the automobile storage, it says excluding permanent storage or wrecked or junk vehicles. What's considered permanent? How long can they stay there before it's considered permanent?
That's always a good question when we talk about temporary versus permanent. It comes up when we talk about temporary stays in RVs or permanent stays in RVs. It's hard to specifically define it because it can be difficult to patrol, and there might be different needs. I believe the applicant can probably tell you a typical timeline. What was explained to me was the wrecker service, tower service that they have. They temporarily bring in vehicles that have been wrecked before they are moved off either to a salvage yard elsewhere or to their final destination. This would just be essentially a temporary tow station. So perhaps they could give us a little bit better idea of exactly how long that would be. But that's a fair question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a couple questions.
Julie?
Lynn, you mentioned another parcel that is located close to this that you said is non-conforming. Can you explain that?
Oh, if you look at the map, let me back up to the zoning map. It's easier. So here you can see the parcel that is shaded with sort of the red striping. The parcel immediately to the east. I'm going to get my directions right.
Back to the aerial real quick.
Back the aerial too. Yeah.
It'll show it much.
There is a pre-existing warehouse that has been there for quite some time that I believe was there. There it is, 6750. It's a warehouse, and you can see some of the aerial shots of some of the activities that takes place there.
And that's non-conforming to RA?
It is legal, but it is non-conforming. Under RA and the current rules, this wouldn't be allowed as a use, but because it has been for quite some time, actually since I think mostly before the ordinance was enacted, it is allowed to continue unless the operation were to cease for a certain period of time.
And the property that's listed LI, can you tell us, or is it germane? Well, it actually is.
Yeah.
What type of thing happens there?
The original this one, the sort of pinkish area. That one goes back to 1997, and it was a conditional use approval for sheet metal fabrication, according to the records. I don't know if that's exactly what's going on there or if that's going on at all anymore, but that was what was approved at that point, and that's what the zoning was okayed for at the time in 1997.
Okay. And you mentioned that there would be a site or that houses in Whispering Pines would be affected. Do you know how many houses that is?
I do not know how many houses are in Whispering Pines off the top of my head. Quite a few dozen, I can say that.
Most of them are not on that road. I lived in Whispering Pines.
Shame on you, you should know.
I know the answer to this question. For public records.
No, that's good if you know.
How many people, other than people driving out, how many people would see it? Like, how many people would see this structure from their porch? Or they see this structure now from their porch?
Right. I can say that our notification zone, which was 1,000 feet from the subject parcel, included about 55 to 56 individuals, which would mean households.
So you got pretty much the whole subdivision then?
Most of it,
Yeah.
if not all, yeah.
All right.
Could you go back to the aerial view one more time?
Sure.
Right there. Does the property 6750, does it have a name?
I believe the owner, I had spoken with the owner, I don't know if he's here tonight or in attendance, he may be, once I get finished speaking. His name is escaping me at the moment, I do apologize, I've talked to him a couple of times. But maybe he'll be here this evening, I don't know if he's on the sign-in sheet or not. If not, I'm going to look it up while others might be speaking.
6750 is owned by Stephen Baker.
Stephen Baker, thank you. Yes, that was what could not come to my head.
Any other questions for Mr. Cochran? Thank you very much, Lynn.
Sure. By the way, does anyone have the handheld microphone nearby?
Right here.
Just in case? Okay.
You want to put that back on the zoning map, please?
Oh, sure. I'm going to leave it on this zoning map, but of course we can flip back and forth if we need to.
Okay, is the applicant here? You wish to speak? Just one at a time, please.
My name's
Before you begin, for the record, please state your name and address.
mine's Brittany Wyrick. It's 1041 Rhodes Loop Road, Madison, North Carolina.
I'd like the planning board to know about your application.
So we just wanted to talk to y'all. We have previously owned this business for about 6 years now. Doing this, the main part of it has been more of a garage. Randy has about 20 years' experience in the garage. He's worked at Claybrooks and different places within the area. Probably about a year or so ago more, we've been got our dealer's license to do auto sales and also the towing sense of it. For this area, we have conditions as well to be approved to be on what they call a tow-in rotation, which is like for the highway patrol, sheriff's departments, the town police. So the conditions with that, even to be approved to do it, you have to have a fence, at least 6 foot tall. You have to have it completely covered by somewhere like the green or the black covering that covers the cars that we do tow in. So our previous location that we have, that's what we have now. Normally on that sense of it, you were speaking about the time frame. Normally when we pick up something, legally we have 10 days. If we do not hear anyone from the customer or insurances or anything like that. So within 10 days, we have to start our paperwork. So normally that process, if it's the insurance that's picking it up, anywhere from 3 days to maybe 2 weeks, we have it. They come, they send a tow truck to pick it up. They take it on to whatever salvage yard they're going to be taking it to. The longest process of it that it could possibly be would be about 60 days, which we have to do our paperwork, and it takes 30 days to do the first two paperworks. We wait 30 days, they mail us the paper. If the owner has not picked it up or paid their bill, or the insurance is not paid, then we have one more paper, which I have to come to the courthouse and do, and then we can sell it. So normally, within that part, we just take it to a salvage yard, to just get it out of the way, on that sense of it. So most of the time, I did bring a picture I will show you from I don't think Lynn has these, but this is our gated area that we have now, that we have to have put up with that. And like you see here, these are the vehicles that are in here. Some are considered completely salvaged, some are not. Most of the time, they're just fender benders or something like that. Normally, is what we have. We do not sell the parts off of them. They're either completely took away from the insurance company or the owner, or like I said, we take the whole vehicle to a salvage yard. On that sense, the rest of it is more of just the garage. I mean, I would say over 80% of the business that he does is more of the garage and repairs. The rest of it, the towing, we could get several tows a week, and we could go a month and not get one. So that part of it, we normally doesn't keep, I would say, anywhere from 1 to, I think the most we've probably ever had at one time is like 6 to 8 cars at a time. Normally, like I said, the insurance company comes quick and gets them. So there's no junkyard, there's no parts of selling or anything like that. We try to keep it neat and clean and put up, because we don't like that either. As for the auto sales, we have our dealer license that we can go to auctions and we can buy vehicles. We can buy vehicles that are, completely drivable and do not have anything other than just a small minor repairs that need to be done mechanically. We can buy vehicles that are salvaged. Previously, where we are now, he has bought salvaged vehicles, and, we'll repair them, have them inspected, and can be sold. So on that sense of it, that's really all we do on any kind of vehicle that we sell there. But like I said, we have to go through all the inspections and all the dealer stuff with that to be able to pass all of that. I do know there is trees planted there, a lot of covering of that. We're willing to plant whatever we need to plant, cover up anything that we need to cover. We have standard business hours. We're not there making loud noises or there late in the evening. Occasionally the tows are at night, but we're in and out. We don't want to be there either at that time. So I guess that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
We're going to reserve the right to ask you questions after your rebuttal.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
At this time, I'm going to open the public comment period and call upon Mr. David Brooks. For the record, please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name's David Brooks. I live at 110 Ridgecrest Drive, Stoneville. I live directly across the highway from this property.
Let me interrupt you for 1 minute. You have 3 minutes. Okay.
I think I can do that. All right, so I know we just talked about this a year and a few months ago. From what I've heard, it doesn't sound substantially different than the original application when we spoke about it at that time. As neighbors, we have a lot of concern about the noise from the operations. It's not a quiet process to repair vehicles, to do body work, delivery of vehicles at night from a wrecked truck. You got backup alarms, you got diesel engines, you got beating and banging. I live probably less than 100 yards or so from where this building's, maybe 150 yards from where the shop's going to be. All the high-speed tools like grinders, sanders, hammering, fabrication noise, we'd be subject to listening to this 5 or 6 days a week, and depending on whatever times their shop is in service. I also have concerns about the painting operations there, the chemicals like the solvents, xylene, toluene, isocyanates in the paint, things like that in the air. vehicles like that do attract rodents, whether they're there for a week or 60 days or whatever. And, there's going to be a lot of traffic in and out. That's a pretty busy stretch of 770, being that I'm there every day because I work from home. That's a pretty straight stretch of highway from there between Eden and Stoneville, and a lot of folks try to qualify their vehicles on that road in excess of the speed limit, I guess. Again, we have concerns about a business like this. Me being the closest neighbor, I have concerns about my property values being changed with an industrial business, with it zoned industrial. And say if they don't follow the conditions, what recourse do we have as neighbors to seek out justice, getting the things changed? Or if they sell the property and it's still zoned light industrial, was to say another business couldn't come in there that would cause even bigger problems. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay. Randy Bradford? Oh, you're one of the applicants, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. We're going to hold off with you until the rebuttal period, if that's okay. Dottie, is it Fargus?
Hello,
For the record, please state your name and address.
Dottie Fargus, 122 Ridgecrest Drive, Stoneville, North Carolina. All right, I live right beside of them, and I can see over there from the front yard, better than they can, because we have an upstairs that's past what trees is over there. But we can hear pretty darn good too, but even with some buffer, I'm afraid it won't be enough because it won't be back enough from where the building is, because we can see over there, we can pretty well hear, and we like to enjoy, of course, our back porch or front porch or whatever. But the main thing I don't think some of y'all don't get, we ain't just our houses that would be affected. Whether they realize it or not, everybody in the neighborhood would be affected to a point, because you have to go up or down that hill to get in the neighborhood. That's the only entrance and exit to Whispering Pines. That's it. So if somebody likes a house and wants to buy it, and then they come right there before they go down the hill, you can see over that way, you can hear over that way, and anything like that in the neighborhood is, it doesn't keep your price values up and whatnot. And the traffic, there's been so many wrecks right there at the bottom of Ridgecrest Drive and 770. I wanted to try and pull it up and find out how many, but my stepfather was in 3, my stepsister was in 1, I've been in 1, and that's just in our family. Of course, we've been there for quite some time. We've been there since that was the Good Time Express, and when it was 11 Unlimited, and after that it was pretty well done over there. And we didn't really have too many problems with that. The only time you would hear something is like if somebody got in an argument coming out or something in the parking lot, and it normally didn't last long, and they would be gone, but that was just them talking. Or, that we could hear that, But I'm just afraid that the noise, I don't know what that is. The noise and the, I don't know. I know tow trucks. I've had a CDL. I know trucks make noise, period. There's no getting around that. And I'm afraid the traffic and the entrance right there, I just don't feel like that's really good. I'm afraid there's going to be more wrecks that happen there. There's going to be devalue the homes, the environment, because there is a creek right there too, which I know they did address some of that. And there's a lot of people that don't realize it in our neighborhood how it could affect them, because that is the only way in and the only way out, and it's right there. And I'm not trying to keep somebody from using their property like they would like to, but is this in a conditional sale? I don't know what's going on that. And I just kind of think maybe it needs to be thought about if this is in the public interest, is it a public necessity? I don't feel that it is. We have several places like that, there's, around. And I don't feel like it's going to hire a couple hundred, several hundred people, because I know people need jobs. I don't feel
Time's
like,
expired, ma'am. Your time has expired.
okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Trying to remember if I need 3 minutes.
Steve Baker.
Hi, Steve Baker, 6750 NC 770. My property is the property you brought up that's adjacent to this property. Nothing's really changed since the year and a half we've been here before. My biggest concern is, and I've been in the cars all my life, 70 years of age, as I travel just in Eden, in the city, you can see garages in Eden that are nightmares. I mean, you can go down Stadium Drive at Trevor Hales. He owns a towing service, and there's cars in that fenced in that's got grass over the cars. There's next door to Tim Biggs, same situation there. There was a garage across the street from Dick's Drive-In here recently. It's closed up now. It was a nightmare. And this was in the city. And I'm just concerned about giving an inch and taking 2 miles, and then we have no recourse of changing that. All the property around it is residential, except the property east of me, which a friend of mine, his family has owned that farm for probably 80 years, and he and I used to build old vintage hot rods in the building I'm in now, and it was basically a man cave. His guys hung out, and we built 30s hot rods for 13 years there, and now I got the building, and it's a man cave for me. But like I said before, I don't want to squash Randy's dreams. Randy's got dreams, but I got dreams. And I'm wanting to put windows in my place and maybe live there one day. But I just, here we are not even starting off on the good point of being a neighbor, because here I'm battling him. And I just, there's a creek. Bobby Joe Woods lives behind this area, this property that we're speaking about. He's got cattle. He's got a pond. There's a creek that runs behind it. Like I said, I grew up in junkyards. I know what they are. There's snakes. There's rats. I mean, there's gasoline and oil and power steering fluids that do get leaked out on the property. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
No, thank you. Richard Lloyd. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Lloyd, 177 Laurel Bluff Road, Stoneville. Okay. I'm giving you a bunch of papers here. First of all, I'm an ASE certified master auto technician with certifications in auto body also. First paper I'm giving you is the area, the highlighted one is my property, which is 4 properties away. Next one is a survey of my property showing the creek is different than what you have there on your maps. I have 800 feet of creek. That has another branch on it. That would be affected. Next up is their Facebook pages showing that they do body shop work and they rely on it. I have nothing against the guy. I've done this for a living all my life. I've owned a shop. I know how it works. The way this works is the towing operation pays for everything. You don't make money without the storage on the cars. And the only way that you make money with storage on cars is getting them from like police department contracts, things like that. Now, usually when you get a wreck or something, you will have your fluids, so on and so forth. But the thing is, you wait for the insurance company to make up their mind. Sometimes they'll sit there a month before they make up their mind. You're charging $35 to $50 a day for storage. That's how you make your money. The shop makes no money. In my shop, I had to make $1,000 a day just in profit to keep it open. And I lived in an area that had 400,000 people. There is no way this place could ever support that. Sorry about that. So also when you get wrecks called in from the police, sometimes they're drunk drivers, so on and so forth. They have no insurance. They'll be impounded by the police. They'll sit there for a year. And you get all the problems with the road and so on and so forth that they all called for. The last pages I gave you are just the MSDSs for epoxy primer only. Now, this isn't the solvents that activate it or anything like that. It's just the primer. And you have to put this down before any paint. And it has epoxy resin, methyl ketone. The really good ones are the trimethylbenzene, ethylbenzene, so on and so forth. Let alone the isocyanates that are in the polyurethane paints these days that melt your lungs. We don't need this in a residential area like this. There are places that are running that they could buy. I feel it's the wrong application.
Your time has expired.
All right, thank you.
I'm now going to close the public comment period because that list of people who signed up to speak has been exhausted. And now we'll hear rebuttal from the applicant. And Mr. Bradford, would you like to speak?
Randy Bradford. I live at 131 Evelyn Court in Reesville. I'm not trying to have a full-blown body shop. I mean, I have a garage. That's where most of my money comes from. I've been doing this my whole life. I grew up in a Jaguar shop, and I worked at Tri-City, Battleground, Master Tech. Even if I did do some body work or paint or whatever, everything's got filters. You wear a mask. It's got mask inside paint booths, everything. I have an environmental company that comes out right now, that comes to my shop now, and I pay them to empty all my waste of everything. I noticed before they talked about, it had a nightclub there before, and they would have arguments and fights and stuff like that. It seemed like that wasn't a problem, but I'm not trying to do all that. I might come in and tow a car. I'm not going to be there all night. I work from 9 to 5. I tow a car every once in a while, when it's wrecked, and then it's going to be towed out as soon as the insurance company comes. And they don't sit there for, I've been in the towing now for 3 years. They don't sit there for a year. I've never had a car sit there for a year, and it's a clean, neat place. I mean, that I have now, so. It's not going to be a junkyard or anything. So.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Bradford?
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Bradford, there is currently a building sitting there. What is the condition of this building, and do you plan to use this structure? It's been sitting there empty for a very long time.
It has. I'm going to use that building if everything goes through as an office and a couple of bays on there. But later on, I want to build another structure with a taller roof that I could put a lift in for my garage, because the roof there is not as tall. So
How many feet are you talking about in this future plan?
The lift is only 15 feet tall.
So you would need, what?
Maybe 20.
Maybe 20 feet?
Yep.
Okay. And the current, do you happen to know how tall the roof is now? Is it 12 feet? Does that sound reasonable?
It could be. It's a cement floor, cinder block building. So,
And what do you plan to do? So the site plan that you've given us looks pretty comprehensive. I know this area very well. I lived there. I lived in Whispering Pines. So I know what it looks like to come up to top of the hill and look over it and see what's there.
I've
So-
actually worked on a couple people's cars that live in Whispering Pines and at my garage now, and I've asked them about what did they think about it, just to know. I'm not trying to, put something there somebody don't want. And I talked to a guy, and he said he's worked there, he's lived there for 15 years. And he said he don't see a problem with it.
So your plan is to improve from what it looks like now, which is not all that great.
Yeah.
That's my questions.
Corey?
So when you bring in Rex, as Mr., I think, Brooks, or one of the last ones that spoke, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, indicated that, there's going to be fluid leaks and stuff like that. What's your plan for mitigating that environmental impact for fluids and things like that, leaking from wrecked cars?
We have oil dryer that we use. We're going to have gravel down. It's not going to be nothing major. We clean up everything that we have. I'm not saying vehicles don't leak fluid. Some do. Every car does on the road just about. But it's not going to be enough that would even matter. You'd never see it. It would never be in a creek or anything like that.
I'd also like to point out that when these types of chemicals are going to be used, and this matter comes before the TRC, Technical Review Committee, that will most definitely be discussed, and if there's issues that require any kind of compliance certificate with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, those most definitely would have to be secured before any operation like that could begin. I serve on the TRC, so I know what the procedure is, and it's extensive. I've seen projects that when the first site plans are introduced, before final approval is given, it's a year. So it can take that long to hammer out all the details necessary for a project to move from initial presentation all the way to opening the door.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Just thought you'd
Actually,
like to know that.
I've got another question. I apologize. The hours of operation, what are those? And, bearing in mind that there used to be a nightclub there that you could hear the music until all hours of the night.
He said 9 to 5.
9 to 5. So you're not looking at, okay.
It's only going to be 9 to 5. That's what it is now.
Very much late night.
Just towing a wrecked vehicle, that's it, no work.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Sydney?
You currently have a towing business and a body shop or salvage where you're working on cars. Why do you want to put another one here?
Because I'm leasing a property right now, and I'm trying to buy this property.
Okay. And on your site plan, if this, where it's you've indicated storage of vehicles, if this was full, how many vehicles would be in there?
At the most, we might have, like now, we only have at the most maybe 6 or 7 at a time before the insurance company comes, or, we get rid of them ourselves after, 60 days. We don't keep them. They go in and out. We don't even have enough, it's not enough work around here to have a full-blown, like a salvage yard. They move pretty fast, and we don't keep them. You might see a car here today, and tomorrow it might be gone. They never stay. Like right now, I have the most, I might have 3 cars in my lot, and 2 of them is going to be gone this week. So that's all it is.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Any further discussion by the board?
Mr. Chair, I would like to acknowledge that I'm sitting on the fence with this one a little bit, because what he wants to do is very consistent with the other two pieces of property that are adjacent to him. However, the people in Whispering Pines have a really good point, that there are about 5 houses that you can see over to that building. And I'm not real sure, I would feel more comfortable with this if there were, if the conditions were right, so that that could be mitigated. Because, I mean, they're pulling out, they're pulling out of the subdivision right now, looking over the hill. Now, the first house is pretty much at the top of the hill. So I'm sure Ms. Vargas can see exactly, she can look out her back door and kind of look over and see what it is. Noise is not a problem, because there was a nightclub there. I remember listening to it.
Nightclub, huh?
There were 2 nightclubs. There was Good Times Express for many years and the 11 Unlimited, and you could hear it when they were partying over there. But the site is, she's very correct about that. So I would feel more comfortable with this if their concerns could be addressed via the conditions. Because that, to me, those are definitely legitimate concerns.
Question for staff.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Can we add a condition that specifies the type of foliage or plantings that'll go in there?
You could. Current requirements include an evergreen screen. It has to be evergreen. It can be.
Well, cypress tree would certainly qualify.
It can be interplanted. It has to be 15 feet deep, and it must reach a certain height within a given amount of time. However, if you wanted to include something like very large growing hollies, arborvitae, magnolia, some of the very tall growing canopy trees, I don't think that would be unacceptable at all. I mean, I think it'd be fine.
Or is there a way to write the conditions so that there's a double layer of buffer? Because when you're sitting there, if it's tall enough, you're not really going to be able to see the building all that much. You'll see the driveway, but the building sits back from the driveway. That's particularly in the front of it. Well, even on the side, because Mr. Baker's got a point too. And then and the folks that live behind them, although that's pasture land.
Yes, certainly. We had actually discussed that as part of looking at what the conditional approvals were, if you wanted to put in a requirement for a denser
Yeah,
buffer
so
screen.
we've done the same thing to Duke Energy when at substation. That's sort of what was in my mind,
We have.
because there's almost like triple layers there.
Yeah.
Because there's residents around it, and we've approved things like that. So that's where that was coming from in my mind.
Yeah, reasonable. There is one point I wanted to make. I forgot to make it. Marzie reminded me. It just so happened that during our discussions and preparing all of this, we chose the light industrial category as the overall parent category. But if you pay attention to each of the individual uses, they are also allowed in the highway commercial category. So it was kind of just an eeny-meeny. Do we want to go with light industrial or highway commercial? And we chose to go with the light industrial because there's already some of that around.
Right.
But there's also a little highway commercial around there too. So the board could take that into consideration and say, well, maybe this will be better as highway commercial. But that's just something I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of. Yeah.
The building that's already there, how long has that been there?
It was built in 1975, according to the county tax records. It's been a nightclub and a couple of things in the past. I bet Julie could tell better than just about anybody how long it's been in disuse, but it's been a long time. Not calling you out, Julie.
She knows about that nightclub.
Yes, I do.
She ain't the only one. There are quite a few people in the
Old Town
county
was
who
still a big thing.
know about that, but it has definitely been years since it has been in use.
Okay. And there's no plan to add another structure according to this site plan right now?
Currently, there's not. Now, this is a concept plan, a fairly decent site
So
plan.
we are getting ready to approve or disapprove this, to put these trees in to cover up a building that's already there? They're already looking at it.
Yes.
It seems like this is a beautification project that
Right.
this is now the burden of a business to try to take care of when it's been there for, I don't do the math.
Right, and that wouldn't come into play if the business had still been a business within the last 180 days. But because it's been inactive for so long, it has to come into some type of conformity, which right now, any commercial use would have some type of vegetative buffer around it on all sides, not usually against the highway, but on the remaining sides, they'd still have to have some type of visual screen of 15 feet deep, shrubbery, or fence, combination masonry wall, that kind of stuff. So because it's been in non-use, it's considered non-conforming, which means if any more future use has to bring it into conformity. If this had been a business last week and it's trying to change the type of business, that wouldn't come into play at all. I mean, we might first, as part of conditions, yes, but as far as needing it, if it didn't have it before and it was still in use, it wouldn't have to have it now.
Right.
But because it wasn't in use, we had to bring it into conformity with our current regulations.
And will that help with sound absorption and maybe even chemical absorption at the same time? The deeper the buffer or the more varied the
Deeper and more
buffer?
evergreen landscape buffers do act as sound barriers.
Okay.
And that's why about the creek and the other tributaries, we put that in there, that as part of this, a survey will need to be completed. If there is an intermittent or perennial waterway on that stream, it will have the 50-foot riparian buffer, which is the maximum required in the western two-thirds of North Carolina, which is considered suitable for filtration and removal of multiple types of pollutants, things like that, in addition to what NCDEQ and NCDOT will require for managing hazardous chemicals.
Now, back on the landscaping buffer, Lynn and I had talked about a deeper one of 20 feet instead of the 15-foot standard, but that doesn't really address the concerns that people have with being a view over the trees. We have a height regulation, I think it's 6 feet coverage from ground.
Within 3 years, they have to reach 6 feet or something similar.
Yeah, 6 to 8, somewhere in that range as far, but if they did a masonry wall, it'd only have to be 6 feet.
Right.
So that doesn't cover that height problem, which is why we took it back down to the normal 15-foot as opposed to the 20-foot. I've got no qualms with increasing that. My qualms comes in, how are we going to guarantee that a tree grows to a height higher than our ordinance of 6 to 8 feet? You know, there's no way to guarantee they're going to get 12, 15-foot tall trees, which may even then still not help with that.
You can put Leyland cypress in there, they'll live through anything. But, yeah, but we do the same thing, like, we've done the exact same thing for
With Duke Power and stuff, yeah.
Exactly. And that's where my head was on that one.
If I may go back to my point, that the building is not going to shrink, it's still going to be there. I think this would probably be, if they want some type of buffer between them and this place of whatever it's going to be in the next 2 months or, 2 years or 5 years, this is probably one of the better options that they're going to get to cover this place up. My other concern, their concern was the noise. I mean, this is a highway. We're not going to be able to stop trucks and tow trucks from going by. I don't think that it's going to add too much noise to an already busy highway. But what my point to this would be, the other sound issue would be, Monday through Friday type work week. Is there any conditions to prevent them from working on weekends and stuff like that we could add? Or would that be too much?
I'm not sure. Places used to do that, but we haven't seen many cases of that in the last decade or so across the state. I'm pretty sure that got struck down as far as not being, the only conditions that we can apply are things that we can legally control. Since we don't control all business operating hours, I don't think we can restrict it to limited. That can be addressed with the county attorney maybe, but from my understanding, if we can't do it if the state doesn't give us authority to regulate it, we can't even add it as a condition. That's why all our conditions relate to things that involve screening, structure type, area usage, but not so much business operations. But we can get some clarification from the county attorney on that if we need to.
Yeah, Margie's right. It used to
It's
be
up to
very
y'all.
common to put restrictions like that on them, but we haven't for
Yeah.
quite some time for different legal reasons.
Yeah, and in this case, if he has to do a pickup on the weekend, I mean, that's when the wreck happens. He's-
I think they used to do that a lot with, like, say, the private club that would have been there. But that was controlled through alcohol laws of no sales on Sundays. Otherwise, they could have been open midnight to midnight. But you could regulate no Sunday operations because no Sunday sales on alcohol if you had blue laws. So I think we'd have to get clarification on something like that, but I think it's overstepping our reach.
James.
I have just one other question that kind of popped in my head as we were talking about looking down on the property. This may be for the applicant. Nobody's really talked about lights, light, any kind of lighting filtration. I know that comes up a lot on our retail establishments that we get with the down filter of lights, how important that is, especially since we're going to be an upward grade, so to speak.
They would still have to maintain all the operations under our UDO. These conditions would be on top of what's there, so they'd still have to fall in line. We already have, it's not quite a dark skies principle, but everything's supposed to be shielded from the neighbor properties and only directly onto the property. We did try to take care of some of that with the signage by doing a monument sign that's not lit directly, to remove some of that at the highway area, spillage into the road kind of thing. But as far as the property, all light should still only shine to the property in and of itself. Spillage, you get that from your neighbor's porch light too. So we can't control that, but the direct shine by our ordinances cannot go across that property line. So
I just wondered only because we're going to have a storage area back there that's going to be fenced in and
Right.
you know, petitioned off, so to speak, to keep prying eyes from, insurance adjusters, whoever, somebody trying to get their car back. Is that going to be lit, from pole lights or?
that's up to the applicant to decide, but if y'all are so inclined, you can add conditions. If you do want to move forward with something like this, you can add condition to that effect that, you can limit the light even further than our own ordinances do.
And then just kind of to play devil's advocate for just a second, I just want to pose a thought. If the roles were reversed and the subdivision was on the other side of the road and he was putting an application in for his place on the other side of the road, would we still having this same conversation? Because we're talking about looking down into his property and trying to regulate what he does versus if he was on the other side of the road, we'd be looking up. Would we still be making the same argument? Again, just trying to play devil's advocate. It's his property, and traditionally, we tend to favor, you can do with your property what you'd like to do as long as it fits within the law, which is what we're deciding here today.
That's great.
But it just makes you wonder.
Right. And I will point out, as Lynn mentioned earlier, the only reason staff is recommending approval with these conditions or more, these are the minimum that we would agree to, is largely because of the character in the general vicinity. This area may be residential, but there's plenty of commercial to be had within half a mile of this place. I mean, so our reasoning for that is it's not uncharacteristic, but we did try to keep these conditions so that any use there would be characteristic. I mean, right now, someone could tear this building down and build a 35-foot tall McMansion with a swimming pool, parties every weekend, with a backdoor garage where they're building cars. Same kind of noise being made. So, and even then, further that, we would allow home occupation to some extent of small engine work if they wanted to. So within our own rules, to find the reasonableness and the consistency, applying these type of conditions, even though it may be a beautification effort, what it really is a mitigation effort to making sure it kind of camouflages into the community as opposed to being a thumb from the public right-of-way view. I understand the neighbors' concerns. We took that heavily into consideration, and we've applied things that we can legally apply into this process. And that, again, like the TRC review being a final thing, I don't have to take every commercial project to TRC. That's another condition that we wanted to put on here so that DEQ could lay an eye on it, so that DOT could lay an eye on it, that kind of thing. So there'd be a little bit more oversight to help again, mitigate those, any kind of complications that may be perceived to the neighbors.
We're kind of back as we were in our last meeting where we have a lot of residential protected, a lot of residential agriculture, and then we're going to plop, a certain parcel down, and there's others in the vicinity. So it kind of feels familiar.
Yeah,
What we
and-
just recently went through. And again, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and just, pointing out those things that just seems kind of odd.
Well, and to be fair to us, this is going to happen anytime that we try to plot commercial into our county that's not already along 29 or 220. Anytime that's going to come up, it's always going to feel like this. Everything's always going to be surrounded by RP and RA, just about everywhere you go. And again, like Lynn pointed out, we could mitigate this down to a highway commercial. That would be less impactful. The only reason LI was considered, like Lynn said, is because immediately 2 properties over is light industrial. The closest non-residential zoning districts are light industrial. Then you get highway commercial a little bit further, and then the one neighborhood commercial just down the street. So that's the only reason that was picked, but the uses still would be compliant with highway commercial as well. And this is, again, a highway.
Thank you.
Do you hear a motion? If you need to see the phrasing of the motions available, they're on the back page of your packet.
Oh, okay, sorry. Mr. Chair? I'd like to make a motion that the planning board recommend approval of case 2023-14 dependent on the additional conditions as stated, which aim to help promote the residential character of this area and to better conform with the intents and descriptions of the G1 land class. Do I need to list them? Okay. Yes. Okay, I did.
Did he finish?
He finished.
Yes.
I'll second the motion, but I would like to add the condition of increased buffer. Yeah, buffer density or something like that. However Lynn said it, I can't remember now.
I will withdraw my motion and make that amend.
Okay.
Yeah, all you have to do is just amend your motion to agree.
To a match with two.
Yeah.
So amended.
So amended.
What the current regulations require for any non-residential development is a 15-foot deep evergreen shrub tree, essentially parcel perimeter border. I would think about making it very specific as to, do we want that to be 20, 25? How many feet more do we think will be the best way so that can be a very specific and measurable?
I'll say 20 feet. The vegetation, it's a vegetative, I just couldn't think of that word, vegetative buffer to at least, or plants to it that will have the potential to grow to at least 20 feet.
Are y'all also amending the building height as discussed?
Yeah, the applicant seems to think he could get away with 25 feet. Is that correct? 25 feet on the height? We changed that to 25.
Keep picky up there.
So are you amending again?
If you're not comfortable with that, Dylan, you don't have to.
No,
Okay.
I'll make that amendment as well.
And we're adding a 20-foot wide vegetated buffer.
20-foot high vegetative buffer. Oh, and wider.
I heard it as 20 feet deep and 20 feet.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, deep and high.
Just to be clear, On the vegetated buffer from at the street level, we're asking for 20-foot wide. Is that correct?
And
20 high.
20 high.
Well, I would think the way I would suggest to phrase it is, pardon me.
Oh, how tall the trees are going to grow, Jerry.
Right, well,
Have the potential.
suggests certain types of taller growing species, but I think the best way to phrase it would be where there is or will be lacking any buffer that is not at least 20 feet wide and 20 feet at maturity, that should be installed.
Okay.
Does that sound?
Yeah. At maturity.
Yeah.
And maturity.
Okay, Dylan, you good with those changes in your motion?
Yes.
Do I need to second it again?
You want to just restate your motion as amended? Just say as amended.
Okay, as amended.
Okay.
I will remake the motion to recommend of case 2023-14, dependent on the stated conditions and the ones listed.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the zoning map change for case number 2023-14, pending the, or incorporating rather, additional conditions as beyond what those specified in the application. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, like sign. Okay, and on a vote of 7-1 with Mr. James Fink dissenting, the planning board will make a recommendation to the county commissioners to go ahead and approve this rezoning request.
At present, the commissioners' hearing is scheduled for October 16th.
Do you want to tell them that the commissioners, what they do? Did you tell them what the commissioners do already? Yeah.
The next item on the agenda is new business.
You could take off the thing at the podium.
I forgot, Margie and I realized that we forgot to add one item to the new business agenda. We need to hold elections in October. We're due for annual elections, so we need to add that on to October. Okay, so.
Microphone.
We will be due for annual elections at the next regular scheduled meeting, October 9th. And I was going to take a poll to see how you guys want to maybe time the meeting on the 9th. Marzie and I have spoken with Jesse Day and some folks at PTRC about coming in, since we have quite a few newer members in the last couple of years, to do a broad sort of educational question and answer seminar type situation. And they're great at what they do, and they'll be happy to do it. We could approach it a couple of different ways on the 9th. We could, if you all are able to make it early, say like at 5:30, we could do it before the meeting. The case that we have that night should be pretty short and sweet. We could have the case and then have the training immediately thereafter and still probably be done by 7:30, no later than 8. So it just really depends on how you guys feel about, can you all make it at 5:30, or would you prefer to just have the regular time
Lynn, would this be like regular session, or would this?
This would be a workshop attached before a regular session.
Okay.
If we do it or before the meeting. The PTRC pointed out they have done this training for us since about 2019, 2020. Normally, in the places I've been, we try to have these every 2 to 3 years, not every 5. Membership changes. People come on, people come off, new people come into the community. I believe our newest alternate's here tonight, but he's so fresh to it too. So it's a good time for us to try to get cobwebs kicked out for some people and some people to get a crash course. But we can hold it as a workshop early. That would be my preference to an extent. And also I believe the PTRCs, so they're not, they're traveling in from Kernersville, Winston-Salem, wherever they live to be here to do this for us, granted for a fee. But yeah, but it's not a huge fee, so I feel kind of guilty about making them stay out late at night. But that's y'all's call if you can make it. We would like this to be heavily attended by everybody, and unless emergency.
What's your pleasure, 5:30 or 6:30, and with a seminar to follow?
Compromise and say 6.
They got we can do 6. It's still about a 45-minute window that we're doing with this work, but we can do that and just have that the public hearing is listed as near after 6:30 as possible, so we can meld into our regular session. That shouldn't be a problem. So if y'all want to do a compromise of 6, we've got no qualms with that either.
Are y'all proposing?
The problem with that is that the bylaws require the planning board meeting to commence at 6:30.
Well, in effect, the planning board meeting will be commencing at 6 o'clock with a month's notice.
I think we can get away with that.
I mean,
We wouldn't hear a case though until 7 o'clock.
Right, but that still meets our legal obligations through planning, through the 160D, because
As long as we have ample time for public notice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Are y'all proposing feeding us?
So what,
I was going to suggest that, but I didn't want to say that.
Well, I'm the one that always
Well, I
thinks
was
about
trying to
food.
think
Look
of-
at me.
I make great spaghetti sauce, so I mean, you want me to?
We will consider.
I think that would be nice.
Well, because I've got money in my training budget. I think we can find something.
do you have enough for Jacques Pepin to cater this?
Nice.
I know y'all think they pay us like that, but
I'm just happy that you're actually going to give us some training now, since the commissioners don't think we get any. Appreciate that.
yeah. To be fair, this came about prior to that.
Marcy and I have been talking about
We've been tossing this around for about 3 or 4 months. However, because of that, I felt the urge to go ahead and get this knocked out. Since if other people are making those kind of comments, I figured it was go ahead and knock it out or be told to knock it out.
In all fairness, it wasn't other people, it was just 5.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Yes,
But I'm
sir.
saying I'll either be told to do this or I can go ahead and pull the trigger. We had originally thought about doing it around January, get through the holidays, get through the fall, and then that way people have more time in their schedules. Because I know kicking off right now this football season, things like that. But we went ahead and just pulled that trigger.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so are we agreed then that the October meeting will be commencing at 6 PM?
Is that a move, and then I second?
We don't need to vote on it, just say you agree or you don't agree. Okay, we're good.
And this would have been Matt Farwell's last session as a sitting board member. He and I have connected, and he confirms that he does believe October 1st or September 30th to be the end of his second term. He has requested reappointment as an alternate member, which can happen for a period of 2 years before a member is reseated. That has been submitted to the commissioners, but it will likely be probably the first meeting in October before we get that.
Yeah.
Or you're going to do reappointment. We're trying to get you seated as a member to take Nancy.
Any other business before the board?
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.